Okay, please open up. We're going to pick up there right at the end of chapter 4. Kevin has a large task before him this morning, and you can tell I'm not sure my voice will make it through the whole thing, so we'll get there. We'll get there. But we're going to pick up in Song of Solomon right at the end of chapter 4, and then move into chapter 5. And I'm going to do my best to touch on 6, 7, and 8, so that we have a good understanding and overview of the book. I might not get into some of the detail that I normally like to, but as I mentioned, I have prepared my study guide in Word. If anybody's interested in it, that you're certainly welcome to it. That contains my thoughts. Just send me an email and I'll email it to you if you want it. Else, that's what it is. It's my thoughts. So take it for what it is. Brother Bud, if you'll direct us in a word of prayer, then we'll begin our class.
Dear Heavenly Lord, we're thankful to you for allowing us another opportunity to study your word. We're thankful for this day that you have granted us. We pray that we will use it in service to you, and that we will continually strive to do your will and to be as close to you as possible. We're thankful for Kevin's efforts, not only for the class today, but for this entire quarter, for the variety of material that he has presented. We pray that it will help us to build a closer relationship with you and to know more of what you want from us. We pray that you'll be with us always. Through your Son and our Savior, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bud. So we got into chapter 4 last week. And as you know, the wedding started. We discussed that in chapter 3, 6 through 11. And then the beginning of chapter 4 is where it starts the wedding night. And of course, the consummation of the marriage between the beloved and the Shulamite. And so we talked about that last week. We made mention again in chapter 4 and verse 8. Or actually chapter 3 and 11 speaks of their wedding. Chapter 4 and verse 8 is the first use of my spouse. And so from that point going forward, or from that time frame going forward, now we consider the Shulamite and here Solomon as husband and wife as we continue to study this great book. And so let's pick up in verse 9 just very quickly. I'm going to get through chapter 4 very quickly here and through 5:1, because that'll start our next section as we talk about the maturation, if you will, of the marriage, some of the problems and some of the things that they went through, and of course the reconciliation, and again just the great expressions of their love for one another as we go through this. Let me see if I can get the slideshow to work. Let's see. I think Zach turned on the recording and therefore it stops the. There we go. There we go. So we want to briefly talk about 12 through 15 and verse 16 of chapter 4. This is, again, he is expressing his depth of his passion for his beloved. And again, as I mentioned in verse 8, he has referred to her as her spouse, right? So they are married. Beginning in verse 9 of chapter 4, you have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Remember we made reference to that last week. That term sister, spouse is just an affectionate term and it means his spouse. Again, it's not talking about his sister, physical sister, but it's just an affectionate term for one's wife. How fair is your love, my sister, my spouse? How much better than wine is your love, and the scent of your perfumes, and all spices your lips, O my spouse, drip with honeycomb. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. Here, again, describing how fair she is, describing his passion, his love for her, and his appeal for her. Again, we believe this is again the consummation that we mentioned of the wedding night. It talks about the passionate kissing, and so I was reading a commentator. This is funny. Verse 11, a commentator said something about, you thought the French invented French kissing, but really it's existed, if you will, as a pun there in verse 11. So again, passionate kissing, his desires for her. Again, they were husband and wife, and as we made mention along our class. There's nothing immoral about this. It's a husband and wife relationship that we've been talking about, ordained by God. So natural and good as we think about this. But he praises her virginity. Look at verse 12. This is we can spend a lot of time in this particular section, but a garden enclosed. Let's pick up verse 12. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse. A spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Your plants are an orchid of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, fragrant henna with spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all the tree of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all the chief spices, a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters, and from Lebanon. Here, again, as I mentioned, this is a praise of her virginity. If you think about it, her garden was enclosed. And when we see these term garden used when she's referring to herself, as you think about this. In this section, in the following section, again, it's really talking about her sexuality, her entire self. I don't believe it's some part of the anatomy specific, but her entire being, her sexuality in general. He praises her for being shut up. He praises her for being, she was pure. As you read through this, and we'll see, she makes mention of that as well. And so this is just, again, extend these metaphors of sexuality in general, praises her purity as you think about this. As we think about the inaccessibility here of verse 12, verse 15 says, a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters, and from Lebanon. Here, in contrast to verse 12, when she was inaccessible as appropriate, now she is accessible, but accessible for him, right? For her beloved, for her husband, right? That's the marriage bed is undefiled, right? And so that's what we're talking about here. And that's the beauty of this. When we think about that, a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters from Lebanon, she quenched Solomon's desires. It's clear language. There's nothing, again, inappropriate about it. As mountain streams are refreshing, so she refreshed and she satisfied him. You remember in Solomon's warning over in Proverbs 5 and 15, this idea of fountains and well of living waters. Remember what he said about the warning? Drink water from what? Your own cistern. So we know what's being talked about here, right? Whereas you wouldn't want to do that outside of the marriage relationship, right? You don't drink from somebody else's cistern. She satisfied his desires here, and it's clear what is being spoken of. And it is beautiful poetic language, again, reflecting the desire of the husband and wife, and that being fulfilled within the marriage bed. The Shulamite speaks here. Pick up in verse 16 with me, and verse 16 through 5:1 kind of ends this section. Awake, O north wind, and come, O south. Blow upon my garden, that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. And the beloved responds here. I have come to my garden, my sister, my beloved. I have gathered my mirror with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk of my wine with my milk. And then we have this comment at the end. Eat, O friends, drink. Yes, drink deeply, O beloved. Here, she yields herself to him. That's what is being spoken of, right? He is desiring her. He has requested her. We have that longing for her. And here she makes it clear again. This is talking about totally herself, not a specific part of anatomy, I don't believe, but she is giving herself to him to fully possess her, right? It's his right. It's their right now, being within the marriage bond, to take place in this type of intimacy. And so he is telling her, fully possess me. That's what it is. So you have this mutual desire and possession of one another in the bond of marriage. That's how God designed it to be, right? That's how God designed it to be. That's where our desires are to be met, again, within the marriage bed. And the beloved, he receives it, right? There in verse 1 of chapter 5. I have come to my garden. Note the exclusivity. I have come to my garden, right? And she offered, and she said it was his garden, referring to her, right? And so we see the exclusivity of what God has ordained and what marriage should be. One man, one woman for life. It's exclusive to one another and no one else. And we see that. I have come, I've gathered, I've eaten, I've drunk. And we see this fulfillment with one another. This last word here, the best I can do on this, there's a lot of things written here. I don't believe there's other people present here. There's a lot of discussion on who this is. I just believe this is a comment from heaven. This is the best I can do. Eat, O friends, drink ye, drink deeply, O beloved ones. Only their creator would have been present in this scene of intimacy, if you will, that we're discussing here. Again, I just think it clearly indicates that this is what God has designed and his approval for their consummation together as we think about that. Any thoughts on that? Again, this is just a beautiful expression of the wedding night and the consummation of the marriage. And again, as God has designed it, and this is how we live with one another as husband and wife. Beginning in chapter 5 and 2, I feel like I'm going super fast, but just hang with me. I'm sorry. Beginning chapter 5 and verse 2 through the end of the book, this is really speaking of the maturation of the marriage, right? We're going to see a little problem. We're going to see some reconciliation language as we go through here, but we just see their love continuing to grow. We had the culmination of the wedding night and the wedding and the wedding night, but we still see that passion and desire for them having toward another, even within their marriages they've grown. And that's something we speak of as something that shouldn't go out. The flames should not go out, right? We, as husband and wife, we have to continue to work to keep the flame going, to keep that love and attraction going for one another. And I think that's the lessons that we get here as we think about this section. The growth in their marriage, the physical desire, it doesn't end. It's not over at the wedding night, right? That's the beginning. And you have to continue to foster that and nourish that in their life together. And I think that's what we're going to see here as we start to walk through now this next section here. And I've tried to put some summarizing thoughts. I'm just going to leave those up on the screen for you for each section, but we'll try to touch those as we go through. Let's pick up together beginning chapter 5 and verse 2. And we have another troubling evening. Remember the dream that happened? There was already a dream scene, if you will. Remember that back in chapter 3 that we talked about when she was concerned about losing her love, right? She had that dream. And now we have another troubling evening. And she describes this dream. Beginning in chapter 5 and verse 2, I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my flocks with the drops of the night. And then she speaks here. She continues to speak here as she fails to meet her beloved at the door. I have taken off my robe. Again, she's in a dream. How can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but I have no answer. Verse 7, as we see this disappointing search here now. The watchmen who went about the city found me and struck me. They wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. Remember how the keepers of the city in chapter 3, that dream, they offered their help. And now we see a different reaction as she describes those. And we'll make a comment on that when we get there. I charge you, verse 8, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him, I am lovesick. And then the daughters of Jerusalem respond there in verse 9. What is your beloved? More than any other beloved, O fairest among women. And some view this as sarcastic language, is the way I kind of read it. What is your beloved? More than any other beloved, that you so charge us, right? As she is asking them to help find those. So here in these 9 verses, again, this they call it a troubling evening. Whether she's half asleep or whatever, she's laying there thinking about this scenario that happens. And we see as she's laying there that her beloved comes and he's requesting, open for me, right? Open the door, he's talking about. And he's complimenting her. You see all the terms of complimentary, my dove, my perfect one. and he's talking about the description of the discomforts that he's got dew on his hair. My locks are with drops of the night, whether it be out in the field working or wherever it had been. It's talking about, again, the description of the discomforts he endured while he was seeking her. So he has come at this particular time and is asking her to let him in. But then she in her dream here, I guess already gotten ready for bed, if you will. You think about some of the language. I've already put my, how can I've taken off my robe. How can I put it on? I've already washed my feet. How can I get out of bed, right? To let you in. There was, as we think about if these were excuses in her mind as she thought about this, was there something that was going on was she having some indifference, or was there some apathy here? There's a lot of speculation on what this was. Was it just an inconvenience? She didn't want to let him in for whatever reason. Was it an unexpected visit? Again, we're talking about the king here and his wife. So maybe they had not been around each other for some period of time. There's a lot of speculation on why she didn't get up and immediately let him in. But then her heart yearned for him. She felt compassion for him, got up, but what? Too late. He was already gone. Right. So I think the point of this section talks about there's some issue here. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something that had caused her refusal or her delay, which again shows him to go away, right? To be gone. And when she did get up and open the door, right? He was gone, right? I called him, but he gave no answer. And immediately we see her go into this mode again of searching for him. Again, which talks about, I think this indicates that she knew maybe she had done something wrong, right? Or there was an issue that needed to be resolved, however you want to characterize this particular section. But you have this disappointing search. The watchman, she goes out and they treat her disrespectfully. And the thought there is maybe that indicates that whatever had happened was maybe her fault. Maybe there was some blame there. She asked the watchmen for help, but they again mistreat her in verse 7. They didn't help her. They didn't help her at all. As you remember, they didn't really provide much help in the first dream, but they didn't mistreat her in the first dream. So I see that contrast here as we think about this. But she charges the daughters of Jerusalem. She is lovesick. That term, sick of love, remember that we discussed. She's lovesick, meant that she now wanted his embrace. So whatever the reason for her delay caused him to leave. But now she maybe came to herself a little bit. It's like, now I'm longing for him, right? I am lovesick for him. And that's what she meant. She is aching at his absence now. I don't know if you ever had, sometimes in marriage, something happens, you're frustrated, and then now you're mad at one another. Maybe you're physically separated as well, but certainly emotionally separated. But then there comes a point, it's like, hey, this is not good. I want that back, that feeling of connection back with my beloved. And here she is certainly, she had been indifferent, but she certainly has a change of attitude. And she asked the daughters of Jerusalem to help, and they kind of question her. Well, who is this that we should help there in verse 9? And then in verse 10, let's read through the end of the chapter. It describes, she's describing here now and responding to the daughters of Jerusalem. And what does she say? When they say, who is this? Who is your beloved more than any other beloved in verse 9? Who is your beloved more than any other beloved? They actually say it twice to charge us. And she responds, beginning in verse 10, my beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as raven. His eyes are like dove. By the rivers of water, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like the bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are like lilies dripping with liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is carved ivory, inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. O daughters of Jerusalem. The response to the question to the daughters of Jerusalem gives her this opportunity to praise her beloved, much like he had praised her in earlier sections of the book. He praises her for his appearance in great detail here as we think about them. She praises his physique from head to toe, and we don't have time to get into all the details, but that's some of the language we've already looked at. But he's praising her, how beautiful she is, and his beautiful complexion, the strength in his body, his hair, his face, how strong he is. His overall appearance is breathtaking. That's the point that she's describing here. He's imposing. You think about how can you be, the cedars of Lebanon were imposing trees. He's strong. He's that type of person, highly desirable, beyond comparison. But look at verse 16. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. What does he say? And this is my friend, right? It's such an important comment there, as this idea of friend expresses companionship and friendship. Not necessarily speaking of the sexual relationship as standalone, but she calls him his friend, her friend and beloved. Happy is the husband whose wife's spouse is also his friend. A comment was made, and so she praises him. She's upset about this situation, this separation, and we see that as the end of chapter takes us to the end of chapter 5. Okay. Again, some problem in a dream. We see some resolution, or we'll see the reconciliation here, but we see her attitude change. Whatever the problem was, she goes out and searches for him, has the opportunity to praise her. It kind of rekindles her thoughts of him, and she clearly speaks of him as her beloved and her friend, and longs for him. Chapter 6 and verse 1 together. How are we doing on time? Okay. We're going to be tight. Chapter 6 and verse 1. The reconciliation, again together, I would phrase this section. And let's read verses 1 through 13. Let's just go ahead and read the whole chapter because it all ties together, and then we'll come back. Verse 1. Where has your beloved gone, O fairest among women? This is the daughters of Jerusalem. Where has your beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with you? Now they're desiring to help her after she describes him. The Shulamite now speaks, describing her relationship. She says, my beloved has gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flocks among the lilies. And now the beloved speaks here. And speaking of the enjoyment of the relationship, as we start in verse 4, describes her physical appearance. Again, these great descriptions of one another. Oh, my love, you are as beautiful as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn your eyes away from me, for they overcome me. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep which have come up from their washing. Everyone bears twins, and none is barren among them. Like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil. Verse 8, as now we see, he describes her compared to others. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number, awesome as an army with banners. My love, my perfect one, is the only one for me, the only one for her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed, the queens and the concubines, and they praised her. Who is she who looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun? And now the Shulamite responds here, verse 11. I went down to the garden of nuts, to see the verdure of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as the chariots of my noble people. The beloved and his friends here speak, and we'll talk about this when we get there. Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. And then the Shulamite responds, what would you see in the Shulamite, as it were, the dance of two camps? So we believe this section here is, again, speaking of their reconciliation here based on what we've looked at in chapter 5. Beginning in verse 1, the daughters of Jerusalem, again, they have a further question concerning him. They want to help her find the beloved. Remember, she charged them back in chapter 5 to help her find. And now that they are complying, that we may seek him with you. And then the Shulamite describes her relationship beginning in verse 2. My beloved has gone down to his garden. There's a lot of discussion in this, whether is this a literal garden or is this again referring back to herself, her sexuality, as it does in other places in chapter 4 and chapter 5. I think it's here just talking about, she knows where he went, right? I think this is what it's talking about. A simple reference to a literal garden. She remembered that her beloved would be in a familiar place. She knew where he was. The bride's response to her friends here inquiry assures them that he's not really lost to her. Basically, I think is the message, right? She says, "Hey, I know where he is, right? He's not really lost to me." And the anxiety of her dream was really without foundation, right? At this point, because she knows where he is. And look at verse 3 again, beautiful language here. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lily. Here again, this idea of asserting the exclusivity of the relationship. I am my beloved's, my beloved is mine. Remembrance of these things that she's thought about where he is, etc., has renewed her sense of connection as we see this. One statement that was interesting to me, I am my beloved is mine. Some people note that in the first emphasis was on what belongs to her, in the second emphasis on what whom she belongs to now. She is her beloved's, right? She's expressing that thought back to her in this language of verse 3. The enjoyment of the restored relationship, the beloved now speaks, beginning in chapter 4, describing her physical appearance. We're not going to take the time. We've already talked about the descriptions, these interesting descriptions of how you would describe your beloved, and talking about the flocks and the goats coming down from Gilead, her teeth as shorn sheep, her face, etc. And so these are very poetic terms used to describe her beauty, which she would certainly understand, being one that worked in the vineyard, etc. But he's expressing this great praise for her. His love hadn't diminished. Here's the point. He's already used these terms to express his desire and his love of her beauty. Here again, he's expressing it as they've matured in marriage, maybe again as this reconciliation. So he had not lost his love for her or diminished in any way. In fact, I think we can see it's grown, right, for her. So in this process of reconciliation, or this process of their marriage maturing, again, he had passion for her, but he still has, and it continues to grow. Verse 6 describes her as compared to other women, or verse 8, I'm sorry, when it talks about the 60 queens and the concubines and virgins, etc. There may, you think about Solomon and 1 Kings 11, remember how many wives and concubines he had. Some will try to tie this to the fact that maybe he wrote this in the middle of his life. And so there were, maybe the Shulamite was the first, and he'd already started into his other challenges. Or is just talking about, maybe the numbers are irrelevant and it's just a parallelism that he's using, right, to explain how wonderful and beautiful she is among all others. I'll let you turn that in your mind a little bit. I think he wrote this when he was young and before he had engaged in all of this. So too. Yeah, that's my position on that. And so I don't think this supports writing in the middle of his life or anything like that. Of course, proverb, Ecclesiastes clearly written at the end of his life as he reflects back here. I think he was still young. But what is the point? The point is that he's compared to others. He is assuring her that she is totally unique, right? She is totally unique. The maidens, daughters, and queens, you see that in verse 9. They all see her as wonderful. The women are amazed at her beauty. And this is what I think he's bringing out. She is so beautiful. He praises her, loves her beyond anything that anyone could imagine. And again, as she is compared to these royal classes here. In verse 11, the Shulamite responds, I went down to the gardens, that same language there. So, and I think if my understanding is correct, and it may not be, but as I mentioned back in verse 2, my beloved has gone down to his garden. I think that might be a literal thing here, as she speaks of going down to the garden of nuts to see the verdure of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed, as she speaks there, excuse me. We see she went there to see if their love was still in bloom. It talks about the springtime again, this language we've already talked about. Remember the refreshing and the relationship of the springtime. It's like the love they were in was like the refreshing and the newness and the joy of the sights and the smells of spring. They were so deeply in love. And she sees that's how their relationship is. I believe, as that section is wrote. The beloved and his friends there, or what are this, the daughters of Jerusalem in verse 13, again, a lot, we don't have time to delve into that, but she became enraptured or beside herself, I think, as we look at this. One translation reads verse 13 as, I became enraptured, for you placed me on the chariots of the people. When the husband's first word in the garden were words of praise, for her, she became enraptured over him, right? Again, with great joy, because she felt the reconciliation there that of the praise that she was given to Solomon. And as we see that ending there, even the inhabitants begged her to stay and to return. Solomon noted the intensity of the desire for everyone wanting to gaze upon her. Again, he's just building her up and praising her for her great beauty, not only her great beauty, her great character. I don't have time to go into the two camps and the main am there, but he gazed at her beauty and said, as if they were viewing a graceful dance. And this is I believe what is the referral there, as it were the dance of the two camps, and that actually is the word Mahanaim, a town there that's spoken of. But again, just describing her great beauty as they have proceeded into this period of reconciliation, praising one another. And now we have continued expressions of praise as we think about chapter 7 together. Again, for men, right, as we think about these sections and the amount of praise, when she that first dream, you remember when she had that anxiety that she had lost him, what did he do? Praised her, right? How did that build her back up and thinking about here? And now as they went through some marital problem of some sort, if you will, what does he do? He praises her. He builds her back up, right? And accepting, again, whatever the issue may have been, that reconciliation and how one should act toward one another. Did he use that as leverage against her? We don't see that here. All we see is great praise of her. Again, there was no in this process of whether there was forgiveness that needed to be had or whatever the reconciliation had to be. That just jumps out at me. All these expressions of praise for one another that they have. Something we both, men and women in their relationship, or those that are considering the relationship, need to remember as we think about this expression of praise. Chapter 7 and verse 1. Okay. Continued praise the beloved here. Description of the maiden's body. Again, she's describing him. This again portrays the maturing of the couple's marriage, in their intimacy. They were still deeply in love with one another, attracted to one another. Again, lessons that we all need to learn together, being those that are husband and wife, those that are considering. And so we see that expressed here. This is the progress of their love revealed by this imagery. Is so key and it's so important from the wedding night and now to this mature area of their marriage. Chapter 7, verse 1. How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O princess daughter. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of your hands of a skillful workman. Your navel is a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of gazelles. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are like the pools of Heshbon by the gate of Beth Raven. Your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon, which looks towards Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and your hair of your head is purple. A king is held captive by your tresses. Keep going down to verse 9. Verse 6. How fair and how pleasant you are, O love, with your delights. And a description of his desire now. This stature of yours is like a palm tree, and your breasts are like clusters. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of its branches. Let me now know your breasts like clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and the Ruth of your mouth like the best wine. Again, he's expressing his praise here, and he's describing his desire for her, right? Again, I can't stress enough. We're talking about the marriage relationship, right? This is important to have this attraction and desire and to express to one another these types of things in, of course, language of our day that we would understand, not necessarily some of the things we have talked about as before. As she explains how beautiful she is, right? I think in some of these words we've looked at before, some of this explanation he's given before, but as we've mentioned, one of the things we notice is that the praise of the king is much more sensual and intimate. Again, it just reflects a greater knowledge of the beauty of his wife and how their relationship has grown. And we can see that in the words that are given here. As he describes her body with these things. Again, some of the description, you can try to think about how it will relate to actual physical beauty. But remember, the other point of their relationship and how they've described one another also reflects their character, right? So as you go through and as we understand, the neck is the ivory tower. Remember, he used that before, describing the neck as the Tower of David, right? And so again, we see these terms being used. Again, it was beautiful, like an ivory tower. Certainly, there was some beauty to it, but it also depicts strength. Remember, we talked about how the neck describes the character of somebody. Somebody could be stiff-necked, like we see in the New Testament, and he's describing this beauty of hers, both physical and her character, and her head crowns you like Mount Carmel. Here again, a well-known, famous mountain. Comparing her to that, the queenly bearing. The striking, majestic, and awesome. How great she was in his eyes, and we see these words being used. Description of his desire: I will go up to the palm tree and I will take hold of the branches. I don't think there's any misunderstanding of what he's talking about here. Again, in their relationship, this is all whole and good. Seeing the great character and beauty of his maiden. He loved her. He was overcome with her. And he has every right to her and to talk to her this way because she is his beloved, right? They are husband and wife. And we think about this. There's some other good references in Proverbs. We don't have time to go there. 5 and 18. Again, as you think about the description and warnings that are given there, some of the same language, as a loving deer, as a graceful doe, talking about your wife, that should satisfy you all the time. You should not have longing for another. And again, we see those terms given in the book of Proverbs as warning against thinking and looking at another woman or having those thoughts in your mind. Again, he has these great descriptions of her, just beautiful, of his desire. And then there, as we begin to pick up at the end there, the chapter 7, 10 through 13, she responds to him, her response to his longing, to his intimacy. As you think about this, let's pick up, actually, it's the second half of verse 9. I didn't read that. So the beginning of verse 9, in the roof of your mouth, like the best wine. I think now we switch to the Shulamite there in the second half. The wine goes down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of sleepers. I am my beloved's and his desires toward me. Gotta flip my page here. Sorry. Verse 11, come, my beloved, let us go forth to the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has budded, whether the grape blossoms are open, and the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. Verse 13, the mandrakes give off fragrance, and and at our gates are pleasant fruits, all manner new and old, which I have laid up for you, my beloved. Again, she's responding to his longing. I think is what we see here. Um, uh, she has not only lost herself in him, but also has found herself as you think about their relationship again. And the responsibility of intimacy goes both ways. His desire, her desire, and willingness. I am my beloved's. Look at verse 10. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. There is complete satisfaction talked about here, absolute rest, contentment, if you will. They are complete. It's a complete abandonment of self. What does she say there? I am my beloved's. You notice she didn't use the term, and he is mine. See how and again, this is talking about her longing for intimacy and fulfilling his desire. I am my beloved, and his desire is toward me, right? He is satisfied. It is complete. This again talks about I am my beloved's, and his desire is for who? For me. Talks about, again, the intimate relationship, the exclusivity here of the husband and wife. And she speaks there, continues, and in verse 11, this is just an invitation. Come, my beloved, let us go lodge. Is this somebody commented, is this like a weekend getaway, right? Let's go get away, my love, right? So this is the thought, again, as this is being said here, verses 11 and 12. She talks about giving her love to him, right? Again, all manner, new and old, in verse 13, I have laid up for you. I think the sense here is he's inviting him to enjoy intimacy in ways both familiar and new and complete. The idea would be to enjoy their lovemaking in creative ways that she possibly has planned. I have laid up for you. And so again, perfectly natural, perfectly fine when we're talking about the bed of marriage, right? And their love for one another, how it has grown, and their intimacy for one another. Again, beautiful as we think about this maturing in marriage. Okay, Patsy, how am I doing?
You better read fast.
All right, all right. I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm just blowing through this so quickly, but I hope you're getting the gist of the section. But chapter 8, finally, chapter 8. Let's just read it quickly together and let's have a few comments. Beginning in verse 1 of chapter 8. Oh, that you were like my brother, who nursed at my mother's breast. If I should find you outside, I would kiss you. I would not be despised. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother. She who used to instruct me, I would cause you to drink of the spiced wine and of the juice of my pomegranate. Then the daughters of Jerusalem speak after the Shulamite. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. Again, familiar language. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Just a few comments, and then I won't have to come back to this, but she is desiring great intimacy with her and a desire to express it. And I think the point here, the best that I can understand this in the reference to her brother, like I would like my brother, is in the ancient Near East, displays of affection between husband and wife during those times were not permitted. But between certain family members, it was okay, right, to show your affection. So she's simply just saying, hey, I wish you were like my brother so that I could display my affection towards her. That would be acceptable for him because of her desire for him. And so that's what I think the point is there. The daughters of Jerusalem speak there. Again, that verse 3 is familiar to us. Her mind returns to reality. She's not going to be able to do this, of course, publicly, but she breaks that statement in verse 3, and I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, again, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases, right? So she couldn't do this until a time of acceptable to display her affection to him, right? This again, it talks about the appropriateness of the time. We've used this to talk about, it's used many times in the book of Song of Solomon. Sometimes it's referring to the fact that, okay, it don't stir up love until the time of acceptable. In other words, until you could complete it and finish it. And that can only be done in the bond of marriage to the level that we're talking about here. Again, she's wanting to display that affection, but again, it has to be at the appropriate time. And she couldn't certainly, she wanted to kiss him in public. She couldn't even do that really because of the times. And that's the reference about being, being like a brother. Verse 5, who is this coming from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I wakened you under the apple tree that your mother there your mother brought you forth. There she who bore you brought you forth. And then the Shulamite, I believe that was a relative. We believe somebody speaking in that verse. In verse 6, the Shulamite to her beloved says, set me a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is as strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave. Its flames are a flame, a most vehement flame. Verse 7, many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. If a man would give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. And if she is a door, will he enclose her with boards of cedar? Here again, some of this language is a little difficult and requires a little bit of explanation, I think, but essentially she's describing her strength of love. This idea of having a seal, that language that's used, a seal upon your arm. A love as strong as death. Love is described as powerful, unquenchable, a force stronger than death, and jealousy, emphasizing its invincibility and its value as these descriptions are given. There's a lot of points we can make, talking about this. Verse 6, if you remember from the introduction, you see the term a most vehement flame. If you read from the New American Standard, or ESV, you're going to see that this has either the flame of Jehovah or the flame of the Lord. We made we made the comment that there's no reference to God or religion or anything in the Song of Solomon, like some of the other books that we've studied. So there's only certain translations that do that. The meaning could be, love is a flame, which has its origin with God, certainly. But I think it's more talking about just the superlative or the power of the flame here. So I'm not sure it's a valid reference, since everything else in the book doesn't lead us that way. That this is the reference to God. They want to point this out. Oh, there is a reference to God, right? And they'll use this as a argument. So anyway, interesting to think about that a little bit more. But again, we're just talking about that powerful, this vehement flame, the strength of love. Verse 8. Here, as the Shulamite's brothers, we believe, are speaking here. We have a little sister, and this is interesting. Watching out for their little sister. We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. Again, speaking when she was young. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she be spoken of? Again, watching out for her until her time that she may be wed. If she is a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. And if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. Simple language. If she is a wall, if she resists the idea and have a good character, if she's willing to wait and keep herself pure, she will have again, measures of freedom. But if not, what were the brothers going to do? They were going to help her, you see. And then she answers. What does she say in verse 10? I am a wall, right? She's confirming, I am a wall. My breasts are like towers. Then I became in his eyes as one who found peace. Solomon, verse 11, Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Harmon. He leased the vineyard to the keepers. Everyone was to bring for its fruit 1,000 silver coins. And then to Solomon, she says, my own vineyard is before me. You, O Solomon, may have 1,000, and those who tend to its fruit 200. The beloved speaks in verse 13, you dwell in the gardens. The companions listen for your voice. Let me hear it. Make haste, O my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. We've talked about that verse. We know what that means, right? That's the desire for intimacy. The courtship, you remember, long for intimacy. That verse 14, remember she said that in the very beginning, how she longed for that in the marriage relationship. On the wedding night, he said that same thing. And what's important here is that the Shulamite expresses that same thing here in their marriage. She longed with the same intensity and strength for him as he does for her. Okay, if you want my notes, I'll be happy to send them. I'm sorry we had to rush through that. I hope you got the gist. Great study. Thank you for the quarter.
Kevin, thank you.
Yeah,
You did great.
I really, that's the first time I've taught in depth the Song of Solomon, so it required me to study much more than normal, if you will. If that's the right thing to say, right? As you're preparing for a class. But thank you all. Again, if you want my study notes, I'll be happy to send them to you. Take them for what they are, mine.